here's what we're going to do. We are going to place teams above the line. What is that line? It means that you are a legitimate national championship contender. That's it. It's very simple. If I categorize you as an above the line team, I believe that you are a legitimate national championship caliber team. Now, does that mean every single team that has a path to the playoff or a path to a national championship is above this line that I'm going to give out? No, that doesn't mean that. This means that I think that you're legitimate. There's a difference. And we're going to get through a lot of this. So I'm not going to tell you exactly how many teams I have above the line, but one of the reasons I wanted to do this exercise is, one, we've been referencing it for a couple of weeks. And also because this is a year in which I feel like we have more national championship caliber teams than we've had in a long time. And you've heard me say that countless times on this program. Majority of the years dating back, really my entire career covering college football, you could say at this point in the season, end of September, we've seen 4 games. You could legitimately say, yeah, there's like 2 or 3 teams that can win it. They can they can win it. They can go win it. This year, it's more. And I am here for it. There's more parity in college football. It's a combination of more teams being good and less teams being great. Makes for a more entertaining year, and I'm here for it, and we need to go through it. It's just less obvious. It's less obvious this year which team it actually is. There have been years, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. There's been years where it's like, I know who's going to play in the national championship game, much less who could actually win the championship. So the college football year in some regards was anticlimactic in previous seasons. This one's not, and that's why I'm so excited for it. So here's the way that this is going to roll out. I believe that there's a group of teams that it's just like super obvious. It's like, yep, they're obviously above the line. And so we're going to unveil them first. And then there's a group of teams that might not be as obvious, and I'll unveil them next. And then we're going to draw the line. And then I'm going to talk about some teams that didn't quite make it above the line. Here we go. Let's start with what I think is kind of the most obvious one. Not because they're a great team this year, but because it's obvious. Georgia. Georgia's the most obvious team because they're going to be the toughest out in the country. This is a team that, from a roster standpoint, is as good as any out there, and they're going to have the ability just to continue to get better the entire season because they're not going to be really tested. So they're not going to be required to be at their best until really the SEC championship game. And then I think it's probably the easiest SEC championship game, at least at this point, the way that I'm viewing this year, and I think most people are viewing this year, probably going to be the easiest SEC championship game to win in the last decade. You know, save for a couple of years when, I remember Missouri won the East a couple of times, and I get it. But listen, this seems to be a very top-heavy conference this year with Georgia at the top. And there's a lot of questions about all the other teams in this conversation. My question, if I were you, would be, are there any other teams in the SEC that are above the line? Well, continue to listen, and we'll see, and we'll all see together. To get back to Georgia, though, I just want to reiterate, regardless of the way that they've played so far, regardless of really anything this year, when the rubber meets the road in a championship environment, whether it's the SEC championship game or in a potential playoff game or in a national championship game, you still have to beat Georgia. All right. They're the defending 2-time national champion for a reason. They've recruited at the height of college football. And Kirby has a standard with that program that's going to be very difficult to beat, regardless of if they're the most talented offense or quarterback in the country or not. That's the toughest out in the country because you got to go beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. And that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. All right, let's move on. Again, these are above the line teams. And these, for me, are the group that's most obvious. The next one is Washington. Folks, I was higher than most on Washington to begin the season, and I continue to be higher than most on Washington now. The Washington Huskies are the scariest team in the country for everybody else. That team is easily one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country, hands down. They've got a quarterback that right now would get my Heisman Trophy vote if I was voting just after 1 month of the season. Michael Penix Jr. has been the best player in college football. Not a lot of people have been watching because, let's face it, they haven't had great opponents, but the opponents that they have faced, they have destroyed. That passing game is the best passing game in college football. Quarterback, wide receiver combination, the way that they protect the quarterback, he's never touched. He's never pressured, and they've got electric players on the outside. They've got a great combination of size and athleticism, and also slot guys that can run and are terrific in space. They've got a coach that understands offensive football. He's one of these, almost savants when it comes to play calling, in Kalen DeBoer. And he's also a terrific head coach that nobody knows about. This is my favorite part about Washington is like it's like finding, you guys know when you find like a great shirt brand or a hat, or like maybe you're a golfer like me and you find a great golf shirt brand that no one knows about and you get to be the first one to like wear that shirt around. That's Washington for me this year. I'm very proud of the fact that before the season even began, I was on this train, and Washington is incredible. Now, some have said, and I've seen this on social media, people will be like, Klatt, they don't play defense. What are you talking about? Washington can't beat anybody. Totally disagree with you. Completely disagree with you. In fact, if you actually go back and you watch the games, and if you go back and you actually look through the play-by-play, this is what you'll find when it comes to Washington. You'll find that when Michael Penix actually leaves the game, they've had leads like 52-12 over Cal, 41-0 against Michigan State, 49-19 Boise, 36-10 Tulsa. The guy has thrown 10 passes in the fourth quarter because he's out. They don't need him. Through 3 quarters, they are housing everybody. Everybody. Rome Odunze is an incredible wide receiver. He and Keon Coleman, who doesn't play for Washington, please, I'm not suggesting that, but we came into this season with like Marvin Harrison's the best wide receiver in college football, and I still believe that to be true. But now you've got to at least take a look at Keon Coleman at Florida State. You've got to take a look at Rome Odunze at Washington and see what they're doing. These guys at Washington, that's easily the best passing game in the country, period. They are fantastic. Then you look at their head coach, and this is what I was talking about when I said an underrated head coach. Kalen DeBoer as a head coach. So this started when he was the head coach at Sioux Falls. Granted, not a terrific level of competition, but he's a head coach, Sioux Falls. Then he was a head coach at Fresno. Then he was a head coach at Fresno State, and then he was a head coach now at Washington. In between there, Sioux Falls and Fresno, he went up to Indiana and was a coordinator. That's when I first met him. That's when he first met Michael Penix Jr. By the way, that offense that Kalen DeBoer created was in large part responsible for that great year that Tom Allen had at Indiana during the COVID year when Michael Penix was doing big things in that year for the Hoosiers. Then he goes out to Washington, and here he is, the quarterback of the scariest team in the country. Who can score with Washington? I'm sorry? Who can score with Washington? Maybe USC, okay? Maybe Texas. I don't know about any other. And this guy, Kalen DeBoer, I was teasing this for a moment. Those 3 places, you take a look at his overall record as a head coach. Kalen DeBoer as a head coach is 94-11. Guy knows what he's doing. If people don't think Washington are for real, they are sorely mistaken. That was some Ferris Bueller's Day Off vibes right there. If Ferris thinks he can just breeze through the year, he's sorely mistaken. All right? That team is, I'm just saying, watch out for Washington. I think it might be the best team in the country right now. All right, next up. Let's go with Texas. Texas is an obvious one for me, and it's not because of what their quarterback did. It's actually not just because of the result against Alabama, although that helps. It's not just because of Steve Sarkisian and the way that he calls plays, although that helps. It's not just Xavier Worthy and some of the skill position players on the outside, although that helps. Do you know why Texas is real? Do you know why they're an obvious choice to go above the line? It's because they're real at the line of scrimmage. Their defense is consistent, and it's consistently good. They can run the ball. They went out against Alabama against what I categorize as a pretty good defense. And they ended the game on the field in the last 7 minutes. That's what makes them real. This, to me, reminds me a lot more of the 2004-2005 Texas teams than it does what we've seen for the last decade, or even with Colt McCoy. That Colt McCoy team, the offense and the skill position players were making up for, I would say, a lot of inadequacies around that roster. Not anymore. The defense is real. The offensive line is real. And here's what that does. I've lamented for a long time that Texas constantly plays to the level of their competition. I've said it on this program countless times. But when you really think about it, like, what is that a product of? Well, it's a product of just being reliant on timing and rhythm and skill position execution, which is what they've been reliant on for a long time. But now they're reliant on line play, defensive play. That is more consistent on a week in and week out basis. So that's why they're obviously, for me, above the line. Alabama is 113-1 versus unranked opponents since Saban's second year in 2008, right? And it's like, that's one of the reasons why they're so good, is because they're consistently great at the line of scrimmage. Georgia, consistently great at the line of scrimmage. So you wonder, like, why do these teams like Georgia and Alabama never get beat by a bad team? Because they're great at the line of scrimmage. Well, guess what? Texas is now great at the line of scrimmage. Let's move on now. A couple of teams here from the Big Ten. And again, these are just obvious above the line teams. Let's go with Michigan first. Michigan is an obvious one. This is one of those teams that, while they might not be top end talent, one of the best rosters, they are one of the deepest rosters in college football when it comes to blue chip 4-star players. Rinse and repeat what I just said about Texas, about Michigan in terms of what they are at the line of scrimmage. This team is a boa constrictor. It might not always be pretty, and sometimes it's a little bit slow, but guess what? Once they wrap themselves around you, it's over. Over. And they're totally comfortable being in tight games in the third quarter because they know eventually it's a wrap. It's a wrap. The only time that I get nervous or anxious for Michigan is when they get outside of being the boa constrictor. When that happens, then they get into a game like they had against TCU, in which they turn the ball over. They get out of their mentality. They try things, in particular inside the 10-yard line, then they shouldn't be trying. And all of a sudden, you get beat. But when they are in their identity and when they are playing to their strengths, they're one of those teams that is just ridiculously difficult to beat. That's an obvious above-the-line team. And the next one would be Ohio State. Ohio State, after that win, I feel a lot better about Ohio State after the win against Notre Dame than I did going into the weekend. One, I know that they have an absolute star at quarterback. Maybe not star, but like, you don't do that in the last minute 26 if you're Kyle McCord unless you are a dude. And he made some great throws. You can question Notre Dame all you want for their end-of-game strategy, and I have. You can go back and listen to Monday's show. But the plays still had to be made from the Ohio State side, and he made them. He made some incredible throws. Their toughness was tested. They played a team that basically tried to use the Michigan blueprint in order to go beat Ohio State, and they did so in their home stadium of Notre Dame in an electric environment with a quarterback that was making his 187th start in his college career. All right, that would be a record, obviously, but it was his 51st. And they won. Ohio State did. Doesn't that give them a ton of confidence going into the rest of the season? I would think so. So here's a team that tried to use the Michigan blueprint in a great environment in their home stadium, and Ohio State was able to go on the road, sustain, win on short yardage defensively, get off the field when they needed to, make the plays when they needed to, in particular late, and win the game. It's exactly what they're going to need to do later in the season. That gives them a lot of confidence, and it gives me a lot of confidence. And so that is going to be my first group above the line. And those are the obvious ones. Okay, those 5 teams: Georgia, Washington, Texas, Michigan, and Ohio State. Those are obvious teams. If I find faults in any of those teams, it's one small area. Other than that, absolutely going to be there in the end. Now let's go into a group of teams that I believe are above the line. So again, this is my estimation that you are a legitimate national championship caliber team. So while I might say some things about these teams that you might consider being a knock, I love these teams. I consider them national championship caliber teams. Let's get into it. Okay. Who do I want to start with? Let's start with, in the next group, Oregon. Oregon almost made it into that top tier. Of this next group of batch of teams, they're the one that I can't really find a lot of faults in. I really can't. I like Oregon a lot. I wanted to move them up into that top obvious group, and I just didn't. And I think that the reason is because of my confidence in Washington, actually. The tough nature of the Pac-12, I don't know if the Pac-12 can get 2 teams into the playoff. And so that's the reason why they're not in the top tier. It's nothing to do with Oregon, because I love Oregon. I already told you that on Monday. Dan Lanning loves his team. That's the only reason that he reacted in the pregame the way that he did. That's the only reason he said what he said at halftime of that game against Colorado. The trailer that they put out, the video of showing Colorado talk trash, they housed that team. That was a message to the rest of the country. And Dan Lanning's message, although maybe subliminal, was the fact that, like, I believe in this team. I believe this team on the top tier. I believe this team as an above the line team. And that should tell all of us something, because Dan Lanning knows exactly what it looks like. He helped build Georgia, which is the standard in college football. That, to me, speaks volumes about what happened on Saturday. Lanning doesn't do that, going for 2 and the fake punt and the things that he said, unless he's like, yep, we're for real. I know we're for real. And one of the areas where I watched that game and I thought to myself, this seems a lot different. Obviously an improved defense from a year ago with the Oregon Ducks, but it more so was the speed. And that's something that I don't think we talk enough about in college football. Is, yes, it takes great defense to win championships, and I believe it still does. And yes, it takes great line of scrimmage play. More than that, what has Georgia had the last 2 years on defense? Speed. They can run, man. They tackle really well. It makes it hard on the offense. It just makes it hard. Everything that you get, hard-earned. If you block a play for 3, you only get 3. If you block a play and design it for 5, you only get 5. There are not free yards when you play the Georgia Bulldogs. And that's the way that it looked when Oregon was on the field this year. So that defense makes it real. Their quarterback makes it real. They can run the football. I love Oregon. So for me, they're above the line. And the only reason they weren't in my obvious tier was because of their difficulty of their conference and the fact that they're going to have to play Washington, which I think is the scariest team in the country. Next up in this tier, Penn State. Love Penn State. Man, they are a real national championship contender. Every week that goes by that their quarterback gets more confidence as a young player, Drew Aller. Every week that goes by that their defense continues to play with length and athleticism and aggressiveness. Every week that goes by that their run game gets better and more physical and that they can lean on it more and more. That's a really good team. And again, the only reason they're not in the obvious category is because we haven't seen them yet play on the level of Michigan and Ohio State over the last couple of years, and they still have to do that in that division. So the same thing that applied to Oregon now applies to Penn State. Would probably be in the obvious category, but because of what they've got left on their schedule within their own conference, there's just a little bit more of a question mark. I'm a huge fan of what James Franklin is doing. Saw that team against Illinois. Did they look great? No, but guess what? They looked good enough, and they can continue to get better. And now I can't wait for those matchups against Ohio State and Michigan later in the year. If you're looking at those matchups as a Nittany Lion fan, I would just say that I think they're much more built, suited, if you will, to match up with Ohio State than they are to match up with Michigan. The size or lack thereof of their defensive front would worry me a little bit when facing the Michigan Wolverines, who I already told you in this show are more like a boa constrictor. So that's my thought about Penn State. All right, next up, USC. USC is real. We know that. They have, now while I say Michael Penix has played the best in the country, I believe that, but the best player in the country is Caleb Williams. And he's done nothing to disappoint this year. He's been absolutely flawless. In fact, later in the week, I'm going to have some video breakdown of what Caleb does in the pocket. Everybody talks about what he does outside the pocket. And yes, that's what makes him great or generational. But you only become a great player or a generational player if you can also do what great players do in the pocket and control the game and manipulate the game with your feet and your eyes and your mind, and then throw accurately down the field, which he does. So USC is there. They're third in the country, by the way, defensively in sacks. So while they gave up some yards against Arizona State last week, they do some things on the defensive side that are better than a year ago. Remember last year, they lived on turnovers, and they've gotten some turnovers this year, but it's a little bit different because they're generating pressure. And that pressure, I think, is more sustainable. And the reason I think it's more sustainable is that they're generating the pressure without blitzing for the most part. They've got defensive front players, and I'm going to see them this week, and I can't wait. Bear Alexander, Solomon Byrd, Jamil Muhammad, Stanley Tuafuo. I believe I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. I'll get it better by Saturday. These guys can present pressure on the quarterback even without help from the second level in terms of blitzing. They're top 10 in the country in pressure rate and number one in the country on quarterback pressure rate on non-blitz plays. So think about that. They're the best non-blitzing pressure team in college football. That's better than a year ago. So while Saturday was a bit of a scare against Arizona State, and they do have to get better at tackling in space, in particular in the secondary, they do some things on defense that are better than what they were. And we all said, and I was included in this, that all they needed to do was be better on defense, and then, holy cow, what would they be? So they're still above the line, but they're not quite as obvious. Next up, Utah. Utah is an above-the-line team. Now, you can tell me all you want that, like, hey, Joel, you can't say Utah because they barely beat UCLA. They're defensive-oriented. They can't score a lot of points. Okay. Let's reverse that. What team do you know could be without their best offensive player, their quarterback who's their leader and won the conference back-to-back years, the majority of their defensive line, and several other key positions, and be 4-0 with wins over Florida and UCLA? Like, not many. Utah's just going to be better and better and better as they get more healthy. So right now, do they have a top end that suggests national championship? Maybe not, but they're still above the line because they're going to get a quarterback that takes them there, that raises their ceiling. That Utah defense was incredible on Saturday against UCLA. They went out there and slammed the door shut with their pass rush against UCLA late in that game. And if they continue to play like that and get more and more healthy, even in the defensive front seven, and they get their quarterback back and they get Brant Kuithe back, watch out. Then Utah could easily win the conference. And so they're absolutely an above-the-line team. I've only got one more in this group. Florida State. Florida State. You might be wondering, like, man, we've talked about a lot of teams before Florida State. Well, hey, Florida State has earned being in this spot. However, I would just say this about Florida State. At this point, after September, being able to watch the games and evaluate the games, they have what you could categorize as one of, if not the most impressive resume in college football. But they're a little bit more resume than substance, which is fine, They can continue to get better. And again, I'm going to continue to say this. I believe that Florida State is a legitimate national championship contender. So while this feels like a slight, it's not. It's not. You have to evaluate with some level of realism the fact that Florida State was just outgained by Boston College by 100 yards and escaped with a win. They were outgained by Clemson by 100 yards, escaped with a win. So while they're 4-0 and their resume looks really good, there are some caution lights, and I talked about it on Monday. There's a check engine light on the dashboard right now with Florida State, and we just have to see how this materializes. All right? I love Keon Coleman. Jordan Travis has been playing really good football. But if you really look and watch the game and watch the coach's tape of that game against Clemson, what you'll see and the way that it watches is that Florida State upset the Tigers, that the better team didn't win. If you look at the way that they were outgained, if you look at the fact that they needed a defensive score, they needed Clemson to miss a kick late. We are very easily in a world where Florida State lost the last 2 weeks and they're 2-2, but they're not. So you give them credit and you put them above the line because they've earned that. But they are a little bit more resume than they are substance at this point. You can say, when I watched the game against Clemson, it's not a favored team going in there and taking care of business on the road and getting a win. No. It is a team that upset a Clemson team at home because of the way the game played out. If you're drawing up a blueprint of an upset, that's what it would include. You're probably going to get outgained. You need a defensive score or a special team score. You need more turnovers, and you probably need them to make a mistake in one of those specialty areas, which Clemson did. So while Florida State is above the line, and I love their quarterback, Jordan Travis, I love his big moment playmaking ability. I love their wide receiver, Keon Coleman. It's just some caution lights on for everybody. That's where I draw the line. So there you go. I've got 10 teams above the line. I think 10 teams are legitimately national championship contenders, and there they are: Georgia, Washington, Texas, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, SC, Utah, and Florida State. And by the way, those are in no particular order. No particular order. All above the line.